Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring tools of divination. I've always been a strong believer in being guided by one's own internal light. Ultimately, no one else can direct your life more accurately than your inner guidance system. So it may seem a contradiction that I teach many divination classes in my shamanic art school, including the shamanic journey trance, and direct my personal life based on these teachings. Rather than a what's going to happen to me approach to divination, which can be a very limiting and mono-visionary practice, I use divination tools to help me access my inner guidance. Divination is only as good as the question and the interpretation of the results. The first key in accurate results lies in understanding that our future is driven by our conscious and unconscious intent rather than predestiny. Change your mind and heart and you will change outcome. Know your mind and heart and you can accurately direct your life. In this way, we can live our lives proactively rather than in reaction. This effectively takes us out of victim and places us in the driver's seat of our lives. While the mind sets intent, the promptings come from the heart. Heart and mind need to work together in order to facilitate manifestation. If your heart and mind are divided, you get mixed results at best. Coming from a predominantly mind-based culture, most of us try to manifest solutions to perceived problems rather than creating our heart's desire. We really don't know what we want, and we mistakenly try to use our minds to figure it out. This is one of the major contributors to misalignment between heart and mind. It's the heart's job to access desire, and the mind's job to set intent. It's safe to assume there are blocks between us and our intent or our heart and our true desire, or we would have already manifested what we want. By setting our intent, it's necessary to uncover what it is we really want. For this purpose, I developed the why exercise for myself and my students. It goes like this. What do I want? Well, I want to win the lottery. Why? So I have lots of money. Why? So I can buy nice things. Why? So people will see me as successful and think highly of me. Why? So they'll love me. In conclusion, winning the lottery was a perceived solution rather than a true desire. The underlying desire is to be loved. And needless to say, love is not something one earns, but rather a frequency to be expressed. The only way to know love is to be love. In taking this deeper, we may ultimately find a survival issue, but you get the idea. Thus, my conscious intent would become, I intend to find what I need to know, do, or heal in order to clear what stands between me and love. This, in turn, becomes 3 distinct questions to the divination method of choice. 1, what do I need to know? 2, what do I need to do? And 3, what do I need to heal in order to clear my way to love? When consulting the oracle, so to speak, bear in mind that most answers come through a combination of literal and metaphorical meanings. Having set our intent and clearly ask one question at a time, an accurate interpretation of the answer becomes much easier. The metaphorical nature of the answer allows for an ever-evolving meaning rather than a definitive one. This is the same principle behind which the true scriptures of all traditions operate. In short, you're accessing sacred meaning, one that evolves as you do. When consulting any form of divination, you're really consulting a higher aspect of your own knowing. Follow that out further, you end up consulting the Akashic Records, and further yet takes one to the source, but that's a subject for another day. Our guest this hour is ALEXANDRA CHAURAN. She's the author of many books on divination, including Runes for Beginners. She also is a second-generation fortune teller. As a professional psychic intuitive for over a decade, she serves thousands of clients in the Seattle area and globally through her website. Alexandra is certified in Tarot and is currently pursuing a doctoral degree. I'll introduce Alexandra and explore her views on fortune telling and the many tools of divination after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is ALEXANDRA CHAURAN, author of Runes for Beginners, a second-generation fortune teller, professional psychic intuitive, and a certified reader of tarot. Alexandra can be found online at cpsychic.com or by calling 206-9-C-Psychic. Alexandra, thank you for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Thank you for having me.
All right. I'm pretty intrigued. What does it mean to be a second-generation fortune teller?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to be the daughter of another professional fortune teller. My mother is a very accomplished tarot reader, so I learned a lot from her, and I was supported by her throughout my childhood.
That really helps, doesn't it? Because you never get invalidated. Was that helpful for you?
Absolutely. I think a lot of folks in our culture are told that divination is something silly or dangerous, and that just never happened during my childhood.
That's a relief. So you kind of hit the ground running instead of having to back up and regather your gift, would you say?
Absolutely, and I was supported in other ways too. You know, my dad drove me to meet other divination professionals and magical practitioners, and my mom talked to me about experiences that I had that were disturbing or exciting. And overall, it was a really nurturing childhood for me.
You know, I've always noticed that in indigenous tribes, they say it takes an entire tribe to raise a child, and in most tribes, they would watch the young very carefully, all of them, and see what gifts were starting to show up, and then members of the tribe that were kind of specialized in that, whether it was making arrowheads or being a shaman, would kind of steward the child along until they got their feet under them, and that's so missing in our society, don't you think?
I think so, too. I have young children myself. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I try really hard to make my house and my home a center for spiritual discussion so that they can see that this is something valuable and something that they can use in their everyday lives.
I celebrate that with you. I brought my kids up the same way, and they come out really well. It's amazing. It's a nice balance. Your bio says you're a professional psychic, intuitive. I assume that means you make your living that way. What all do you do in your practice, Alexandra?
Yeah, being a psychic is my day job. I write books as well. Basically, it looks like a counseling practice. I often joke that I'm a therapist that actually helps people, but that's not exactly true. I am a counselor. I actually hold a counseling license in the state of Washington where I work because that's a good ethical thing to do when you're giving advice for money. And I sit with folks and allow them to use the divination tools with me, and we take a look at problems in their lives and avenues for solutions within themselves and within their external environment.
So do you use the divination tools to get a more multidimensional view on what's blocking them?
Yeah, when I'm first introducing divination tools to folks, I sort of explain that the human experience is human experience. The hero's journey has many spots along the way that is similar from person to person. When we lay out, for example, the tarot from start to finish, we can see the hero's journey. And when we lay out the tarot in a specific spread, that tells the person's journey, the person's story. So it's a good way of getting a new, fresh perspective when somebody's caught in a cycle or in a hyper-focus on a problem.
So I'm going to need you to back up and take me along here because I do not do tarot. But from what you said, I'm kind of getting the feeling that the hero's journey is maybe the person's life path and the personal journey is where they happen to be on it. How does that work?
Yeah, the hero's journey is kind of the story that we see everywhere, where people get challenged, people overcome these challenges, people find love. These are all parts of the human story. They're the part of each person's life journey. And so the divination tools are a way to see that hero's journey from the outside. It's like you're looking at your story as if you're another person. And that can be really helpful because we've all had the experience where we're giving advice to someone else, and it's so much easier than giving advice to ourselves.
Yeah, it's always easier to see the issue from the outside rather than from the in, forest through the trees kind of thing. So is being a psychic intuitive the same as fortune telling, or is fortune telling just a part of your practice?
I prefer the term fortune teller just because it invites questions about what I do and how it can help others. When I say psychic, people often assume that I'm saying that I'm omniscient and that I know the answers to all of their problems or I know the future, and that's not precisely true, and that's not something that's helpful. What I do is not really a party trick, although it is fun at parties. What I do is help people find their own fortune inside themselves.
By using tools from outside of themselves.
Yep.
I like that. Is there training available to become a psychic intuitive?
Absolutely. I even have an apprenticeship program here locally, and I've been experimenting with doing fortune-telling apprenticeships online as well. So that's something that I'm really passionate about because having a spiritual mentor really helped me a lot. And I think that the apprenticeship system is largely overlooked in many areas of our society. I think working with a mentor directly helps a student because each person is different. Each person's strengths are different, and each person's goals are different. So yeah, I think that working directly with a mentor is the best way, but I do write books, and so I do think that people can learn from books as well.
So, in your apprenticeship program, do you do that pro bono, or do you do it for trade, or do you charge for it?
I do charge for it because I need to pay for the space, frankly, and so I'm thinking of doing some more affordable classes coming up in the coming years. So stay tuned to everyone. But so far, it's been independent with one-on-one for each student. So it's kind of a seasonal thing that I do with individual students at this point, but I'm hoping to make it a larger proposition so that I can amortize the cost for everybody and make it more reasonable.
Got it. So it says here that you're certified in Tarot. How does one become certified in Tarot?
Well, find a certifying body. The Tarot Certification Board through the American Tarot Association, I highly recommend, because they do hook you up with a mentor, and they have a lot of workshops, training opportunities, practice opportunities. So I highly recommend them.
Where did it originate, Tarot, and how old is it actually?
I am not a big history buff, but I know it originated in the Middle Ages as a game at first and as political commentary. And the more recent application has been as a divination tool, and it has waxed and waned in popularity over the years.
Your latest book is on runes, actually. So what are they exactly?
Runes are a more ancient system. They are a magical alphabet, although not technically an alphabet because they don't start with A and B, but they are lettering that are used for magical spells as well as for divination and encoding sacred text.
Well, I didn't know they were used as magical spells. Can you expound a little?
Sure, I know you like magic.
I love magic.
The runes can be used especially in sigil work. So what sigils are, for anybody listening who doesn't know what they are, it's basically art that combines one or more symbols with other symbolic things such as colors or additional symbology and shapes in order to affect a change in the individual who is using the sigil. So runes are very effective for sigil work.
So it works in the subconscious that way? It goes in through the visual and then works in the subconscious?
Yeah, runes. Each rune represents a very broad category of the human experience. So there's a rune that represents the connection of love and that passion that ignites within you when you first have love with someone. And so when using that rune combined with another rune, then you can evoke both of those emotions within yourself by gazing upon the rune, by writing or carving the rune, the act of painting the rune. These are all ancient practices that can still be used today.
So that kind of like engages with sacred geometry or some of the ancient mysteries that the Templars and actually the Masons still use. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. The runes are all very angular looking. They're called staves because they're all straight lines, so you can easily carve them with a knife in something. And they line up with one another, too. It's easy to overlay one rune on top of another, and either obscure or enhance the meaning depending on what your goal is.
That's fascinating. I didn't know any of this about runes, and so it's like you can use them to actually create a thought process change in yourself just by gazing at them. What an exciting idea! We'll take up with that idea on the other side, Alexandra. We're going to have to take a little break, and we will return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. You want to hear more? Previous broadcasts of innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic, and we'll be right back. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. Visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is ALEXANDRA CHAURAN, a second-generation fortune teller, professional psychic intuitive, and a certified reader of tarot. ALEXANDRA can be found online at cpsychic.com. Alexandra, we were talking about runes, and you have me pretty fascinated. So, do you know where they originally came from?
Yeah, they originally came from the Germanic regions of Europe. And by Germanic, I don't mean just Germany. In ancient times, Germanic cultures were all over Europe, pretty far flung. So runes have been found in many locations. And it's safe to say that they were accessed by several cultures at the time.
So was that before or after the Celtics? I know the Celts spread all the way across Europe in ancient times as well. Is it a Celtic tradition, or was that before then?
I'm not a huge history buff, so don't quote me on this one, but I believe that there was some use before the Celtic spread, and then there was some use after. There's plenty of use as well when Christian times came about. Runes have been found in those little borders along Christian texts as well. So I know that they've been used by the Celts after, and I believe some before. But it's hard to tell with some of these things when they exactly happened, and there have been some forgeries in the past as well of artifacts.
Gotcha. Well, we find all sorts of different ceremonies shared among indigenous tribes here in the U.S., and it's really hard for us to tell where some of them originated because they were shared among the different nationalities. So how do you integrate runes into your practice, Alexandra?
Many, many ways. Like I said, runes are so versatile. They can be used to encode sacred text. So sometimes I will write out runes in their letter forms in order as sort of a mantra practice. As you might write out a mantra over and over again, I might write that mantra in runes. I also use them a lot in sigil work, as I mentioned, which is combining runes in a image format. Often my sigils will look a lot like mandalas, but using those angular runes overlaid against one another and surrounding each other. I also use runes in divination, and when using them in that way, a rune set is made. So each rune is printed independently on its own little stone or piece of wood, and then they're collected together and tossed or laid out in order to read them in a divinatory format.
Okay, so when you make your mandalas for people like a mantra, that's kind of like an integration tool, isn't it? Integrating a new idea or a new thought form or a new way of being in the world by repeating a new pattern. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and one of the ancient uses that I've brought into my modern day practice is to actually write the runes in a spiral or in a circle that goes inward and then outward again. And in that way, it's almost like walking a labyrinth but while writing.
Yeah, I was thinking labyrinth as you were speaking. So,
Yes, that's.
are they
I thought
related?
about it when I was reading some historical texts about these practices, because even though I'm not real good with the cultures or the timing of history, I'm very fascinated with how ancient people used the runes and the practical use thereof, and the hex work, the healing magic, all of that.
Where do you stand on hex work?
I don't practice hex work myself because of my work with Wicca. Wicca is my religion, so we don't really do that. But I certainly believe that it exists. I wrote a book called "Have You Been Hexed?" because I've helped people break hexes before, and I love reading about them. I'm very well educated on the subject matter.
Would you mind sharing with our readers exactly what a hex is?
A hex or a curse is using magic to negatively affect another person. A very simple hex is when you just glare daggers at someone else. That's often called the evil eye. And more elaborate hexes can involve runes or can involve other materials and practices and rituals.
It sounds to me like we can unconsciously cast a hex or consciously cast one. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that people practice magic every day, whether they like it or not.
So if our intent is that something bad happens to someone because we're mad at them, that's in effect casting a hex or a curse?
A very simplistic hex or curse, absolutely. If you think somebody, you don't like them and you want something bad to happen to them, well, there's an intention that you're sending outward, and sometimes you might even seal that with pounding your fist on a desk or glaring at them across a cubicle, and there you go.
That makes it pretty scary. It looks like it's time to get more conscious of what we're doing with our intent and our energy, no?
Absolutely, especially since the ramifications of those curses can often affect yourself as well.
You know, I have seen that. It's like because what you're doing is you're working against the law of nature, and that has a nasty backlash. So you're using natural law to bend natural law. And it never turns out well, does it?
Not quite. Oftentimes it'll at very least give you a headache or make you feel sick, and sometimes can radiate effects that are negative into the life of yourself and your family.
Yeah, but it does bounce back one way or the other. Nature will have its way. So, do you work with specific questions, or do you give a general reading or a combination when you're working with your people?
Most of my clients come in with an urgent question that they already want to have answered. And so typically they come in with a question and I use the proper tool to solve that problem. But I do general readings as well. Oftentimes I will work events as well, like charity events, or a restaurant will hire me to do readings. And in those cases, people who are new to readings don't necessarily have a question. They just want to try it out. In that case, I do general readings.
Are you able to read family members and other people through the client that you're reading?
When reading other people through a person is often called third-party readings in the industry. It's kind of an ethical, tricky issue because ideally we'd want that other person's permission. Well, ideally I'd want that other person there because when I'm doing the reading for that person, it's no use for me to give the advice to that person to their wife or kid. It's more important for me to give the advice to the person in question.
So, what kind of advice do you give?
Most of the advice that I give has to do with confirming what a person already knows or empowering them to make the choice that they realize is best throughout the reading.
I see that you work with divinational tools including tarot, runes, crystal balls, and palmistry, just to name a few. What do you see the value of working with multiple mediums?
I find that each tool has its strengths and its weaknesses. So just like a hammer and a saw can both be used on wood, I typically use the right tool for the job depending on the question, So if a person wants to envision the next home that they're going to build or buy, the tarot might not be the best tool for it because we don't have a picture of a house there, but the crystal ball or tea leaf reading might be a better form because those are forms of scrying in which a person can actually see something that they want to envision. So that's just one small example.
So we've got just a few seconds here. Would you mind mentioning what scrying is?
Scrying is the practice of seeing visual images in a tool. So looking into a candle and seeing shapes, that's a form of scrying.
Okay, so it's like looking at clouds and getting visions, so your mind is actually speaking to you by envisioning something in shapes and forms. That's pretty fascinating. I'd like to pick
It's
up
a
on
lot
that
like
one
dream
on the other side of
interpretation.
this break. We will have to take a break, though. You are listening to The Science of Magic, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is ALEXANDRA CHAURAN, a second-generation fortune teller, professional psychic intuitive, and a certified reader of tarot. ALEXANDRA can be found online at cpsychic.com. I have an interesting question for you, ALEXANDRA, one that is near and dear to my heart. Is when I'm working with divination or working one-on-one with a client, I like to use those tools to help them find where the blocks are to what they actually want versus tell them what's going to happen to them. So basically, it would start out with telling someone where they're headed, but then giving them tools for how to change direction if that's not where they want to go. Do you have a provision for that in your practice, dear?
Yeah, I really enjoyed your intro segment because you really explained how to ask the right questions. And a lot of what I do is helping the client figure out what the right question is in order to empower them for the path ahead. Ideally, I want those clients to be able to fly on their own and not need me in the future rather than come back with the same question over and over and over again.
hoping for a different answer, which brings up the question, how, I see that sometimes people can get addicted to having someone else tell them what's going to happen. And if they don't get the right answer the first time, they just keep asking the same question without making any other changes in their life. And this tends to form what I call an addiction. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've had to cut off some clients in the past that were stuck in sort of an addictive cycle over and over again. It's especially sad when folks are running low on money and they keep spending money on psychic readers when they have financial issues themselves, and that's just heartbreaking to see. So a lot of the times I have to explain to folks that once they're in a better position financially, once they have made choices that are changing their life path, that's an opportunity to do divination for themselves or to talk with somebody that they trust.
I like that approach. I have kind of a sliding scale with my people because I have a school, and so I have a lot of apprentices in the school. And if someone can't afford me, they probably don't need me, and they can start with one of my students, and my students need clients, and it really works out well. Do you have a provision that way for people?
I do have some apprentices that can work an internship for folks, but of course that's up to the apprentice themselves, and I can't really dictate what prices they want to charge. I don't tend to do a sliding scale myself or to do pro bono readings simply because that was a problem in the past for me that I had to end when speaking with my spiritual advisor and my small business advisor. It was really aiding addictions more than it was helping people. So now I tell folks who can't afford readings that they really need to focus on that financial stability and on survival rather than on problems they're typically thinking about, like love.
Yeah, prioritize, right? I've done
Right.
trades in the past. I had a gentleman that was a lovely man. He had a beautiful family. They were a little tight on money, and he was a carpenter, and I needed help around, repairing things and building things around the house. And that worked out really well for me. I've done quite a bit of that. Have you ever done any of that?
That rings a bell. I've been working a long time in this job, so it's not something that I do very often, but I feel like I definitely have done that in the past for folks, trade for services or goods.
Where do you think the information you receive comes from on the behalf of others?
I believe that the information is all around us and inside us already. There's so many patterns. As the stars in the sky above reflect our dance here on Earth, they're all here for us all to see.
Where can people find your books, Alexandra?
My books can be found wherever books are sold, at your local independent bookstore. That's where I'd tell you to look first. But yes, they are available on Amazon and online on my website, cpsychic.com/books.
What advice do you have for our listeners who are interested in doing their own divination?
If you're doing your own divination, dive right in and practice, practice, practice. Try to read for yourself at least once a day and read for others whenever you can. And if you possibly can, find a local mentor to feed your soul with good conversation.
What tools do you suggest for the beginner?
Well, the tools that I suggest for a beginner typically depends on what the beginner's interests are and what their strengths are. Just like there are different learners. Some people are auditory learners, some people are visual learners, some people are kinesthetic learners. If you like to work with your hands, something like the runes or the tarot are very useful. If you're a very visual learner, you might even want to dive into clairvoyance and trance practices like that. But for all beginners, I would recommend recording your dreams. Start a dream journal and keep it up.
Dreams are hugely important. I have written entire books from dreams. I've written entire songs from dreams. I wake up in the middle of the night and jot down things. It's just amazing what can come through our dreams. What do you think we're tapping into with our dreams?
I think we're tapping into ourselves and to that divine source. I mean, that now I'm getting into theological stuff myself, but I believe we're tapping into that source, and we're tapping into the past and the future and the present in a very real way.
You know, I find if I go to bed at night with, so say for instance, someone says, Gwilda, I'd like you to teach a class on such and such, or I have a class coming up. I go to bed at night and I say, okay, given who's going to be present in this class, I leave myself open to the material I need to be using. And it's amazing. That's how all of my classes have been written, and I've got an entire trade school based on that. So do you use it that way as well?
You know, when you mentioned the books you've written, regarding dreams, I've often written my editor a feverish note in the middle of the night saying, "Oh, I have another book idea."
Where can people contact you for a reading?
You can contact me through my website at seepsychic.com. That's SEE psychic.com, or by calling 206-9-SEE-PSYCHIC.
And do you do long distance work?
I do fortune telling long distance, and I'm working on an online apprenticeship program that's available for select students.
And do you have anything you'd like to share with our listeners in closing?
Well, I just want to share with our listeners that I am really happy that you've listened to me today, and if you want to have a free audiobook download code from Audible, then you can contact the Science of Mind or contact me, and maybe I can hook you up.
That's really nice. It's just an amazing service that you're providing. And you've been doing this for how long now?
Over a decade. I think I started professionally reading in 1999.
Wow, that's a while back. You did it as a child though too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, it was definitely a part of my life all through growing up. I just started doing it professionally in 1999 when I went off to college, and it was the heyday of, you know, psychic hotlines and Miss Cleo saying, "Call me now for your free reading."
Well, I celebrate what you're doing and what you're bringing, and I've had so much fun visiting with you this time. Our guest this hour has been Alexandra Chauran, a second-generation fortune teller, professional psychic intuitive, and a certified reader of tarot. She can be found on seepsychic.com or by calling 206-9-SEE-PSYCHIC. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, and guided by your internal light.